British atrocities in India. Number 1. Partition of Bengal. The partition of Bengal effected in India during 1905 was a territorial reorganization of the Bengal Presidency implemented by the authorities of the British Raj. The reorganization had segregated the largely Muslim eastern areas from the largely Hindu western areas. Announced by Mr. Curzon, the Viceroy of India, on 19 July 1905 and implemented on 16 October 1905, it was undone just after 6 years later of implementation. The malicious act was undone. The reason attributed by Mr. Curzon was to augment administrative efficiency. The reason was to implement the cunning divide and rule policy of the Britishers. The partition had animated the Muslims to further their own national organization along communal lines. To appease Bengali sentiment, Bengal was reunited by Lord Hardinge in 1911 in response to Swadeshi movement riots in protest against the policy all over India. The malicious mischief had been effected. The seeds of separation had been sown successfully, as the subsequent events in Indian history proved. This one single act had caused the partition of India. The formation of East Pakistan in 1947, which had turned into Bangladesh in 1971 on linguistic basis and communal basis. The Bengal Presidency had encompassed Bengal, Bihar, parts of Chhattisgarh, Orissa and Assam. With a population of 78.50 million, it was British India's largest province. For decades, British officials had maintained that the huge size had created the neglect of the poorer eastern region. The size had affected the management of the province. Were not the British managing India despite its size? It was merely a ploy to conceal their evil, sinister motive. The real reason was to divide the Bengalis, and succeeded in doing so effectively. Bengal was split into two parts. He had separated Orissa and Bihar and joined 15 eastern districts with Assam. The eastern province held a population of 31 million, most of which was Muslim, with its center at Dhaka. Once the partition was completed, Curzon had pointed out that the new province as Muslim. Lord Curzon's intention was not to divide specifically the Hindus and Muslims, but only divide the Bengalis. The western districts formed the other province with Orissa and Bihar. The union by Western Bengal with Orissa and Bihar reduced the speakership of Bengali to a minority. Muslims, led by the Nawab Salimullah of Dhaka, supported the partition, and the Hindus had opposed it. The English-educated middle class of Bengal had understood the cynical ploy of Viceroy Curzon to vivisect their motherland and diminish their authority. In the 6-month period before the partition was to be effected, the Congress had arranged meetings where petitions against the partition were collected and given to improvise, and largely unconcerned authorities had cunningly closed their eyes. Surendranath had suggested that the non-Bengali states of Orissa and Bihar to be separated from Bengal, then dividing two parts of the Bengali-speaking community. Lord Curzon did not accept the same suggestion. Banerjee had admitted that the partition were ineffective as the deadline had reached. He had advocated more tougher measures like boycotting of British goods. He had preferred to call it Swadeshi than boycott, though the boycott was led by the moderates, which militant groups had sprouted under because of the cause. To further or to against the partition, militant groups in smaller scale had cropped up. Banerjee had decided to include the other targets too, and the schools were boycotted. On 16th October 1905, the day of partition, schools and shops were blockaded. The demonstrators were cleared by the police and the army. This was followed by violent confrontation to the dislike of moderates. They had decided to end the boycott when John Morley had been appointed as Secretary of State for India and believed that he would reverse the decision. Ultimately, they were proved to be utterly wrong. The partition had triggered radical nationalism. Nationalists all over India were supported the Bengal cause. The partition had embarrassed the Indian National Congress very much. Bengal, the epicenter of partition, was radicalized. Gradually, the moderates all over India took over, and gradually the radicals like Aurobindo and Tilak were marginalized. This suited the British unwittingly. The British Raj, unable to handle the protests, had assented to reverse the decision to divide Bengal. King George V announced at Delhi Darbar on 12th December 1911 that Eastern Bengal were once again unified with Bengal Presidency. Districts where Bengali was spoken were unified. Assam, Bihar and Orissa were separated. The capital was shifted to New Delhi with a view to providing the British colonial government with a stronger base. The Muslims of Bengal were shocked because they had seen the Muslim majority East Bengal as an indicator of the British government's enthusiasm for protecting Muslim interests. They viewed the decision as compromising Muslim interests for Hindu appeasement and administrative ease. The partition had not initially been supported by Muslim leaders. After the majority province of Eastern Bengal and Assam had been created, prominent Muslims had started seeing it as advantageous. Muslims, especially in Eastern Bengal, had been backward in the period of United Bengal. The Hindu protest against partition, who seemingly interested in Muslim province. With more of the capital to a Mughal state, British tried to satisfy Bengali Muslims who were disappointed with no hold over Eastern Bengal. 1900 separate elections were established for Muslims and Hindus. This resulted directly in the creation of East Pakistan during 1947 partition.